and welcome to DevBeardOps. Okay, I think that was this intro always seems so long to me. Today was extremely long. I was like,
well,
end please.
you made it, so
I made it.
I
know.
Come.
So I hope you all are enjoying the music at least while it's playing. So there's a reason behind that intro. The intro is here so we can actually start broadcasting in all places instead of us just like hitting the go live button and just like hoping we're live. So yeah, it's just a eventual consistency feature. All right, so welcome to DevBeardOps. This is a weekly show where this bald gentleman and this bald gentleman get to talk about the cloud, automation, DevOps, and I guess everything in between. So and today we're actually continuing the topic from the last couple of weeks about GitOps. So we've talked about GitOps, about infrastructure as code, configuration management. We talked about we had somebody from HashiCorp last week as well. So we had a talk about Terraform, which is pretty fun. And today we actually have another guest. And today we're going to be talking about not enough caffeine. Today we're going to be talking about configuration management, but application configuration management. We'll get into the details what that is and why should you care about those things in a moment. First of all, I want to say good morning to everybody joining us here. We have somebody from Colorado. We have Southern California.
Oh wow!
Wow! Good morning. Good morning. And welcome everybody. Welcome back. We're happy to see all of the all of the familiar faces here. So TypeScript Tea Time, Impulsum is back here again. Learning T is back here again. So Shirley Dev or Surly Dev. So welcome. So you may see that there's a third person here. That person is, Steve. Hello. Steve is also joining us from a faraway land called the East Coast. So Steve, introduce yourselves, please. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. My name is Steve Rice. I work at AWS. I'm on the app config team. Let's see. I like to tell people I'm sort of strangely passionate about configuration. I don't think there's a lot of folks in the world that love configuration as much as I do. So yeah, configuration.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We will not kink shame. Kink shame. That's fine as well, right? Excellent. So Steve is here today with us. He's going to be chatting with us about application configuration management, and he is coming from the app config team, which is also one of the services at AWS that can actually help you with application configuration management. My name is Darko, by the way, and this is Kobus, or the other way around. You can tell and all. So we are both developer advocates at AWS, and our job is to talk to you, developers, builders, all the folks out there who do wonderful things with the cloud, to kind of maybe sometimes teach you something, sometimes entertain, but ultimately be your voice in AWS. So let's kick it off. Let's kick off with the first question. Let me ask you, Kobus.
Yes.
We talked about configuration management, right? The way you can configure, exactly, configuring your operating system, setting up services, application packages, users, all of the fun things. But when we talk about application configuration management, what does that mean?
Pain, suffering, errors, production down.
Hey, yeah.
Yes. It's basically, for any application, there's always a whole bunch of configurations that you have to send to for it to be able to operate. Usually, the most basic one that most applications have is some form of database connection, because most applications interact with some database. And then often you see things like third-party API credentials to call out to other APIs to do things. Maybe some values like how many threads to run, or how many, let's say, child processor or worker nodes to run for certain things. There's a whole bunch of things you can configure an app, it depends on the app itself. But basically, these toggles to change the behavior based on what you want it to be, rather than going into the code and every single time update the code, compile, publish, deploy, that whole cycle, rather just change the configs.
Right. Exactly. And it's something that, I mean, how is this done? Steve, you are a fan of configuration management. How was traditionally application configuration done? with customers?
Without going into a huge history lesson, I think back in the olden days, people used to write code and they said, well, I might change this value later. I might not. I'm going to put this into a separate file, but I'm still going to bundle it all together and then deploy my stack. And that was a very common thing for a long time to be able to make a little change. You can just change your configuration file, then you compile everything and you push it out through a CI/CD pipeline, or even older than that, before CI/CD, you do a build and pray. But things have started to change a little bit to say, well, wait a minute, if this is living in a separate configuration file, then I can maybe deploy it separately. And that's kind of what you're talking about, this dynamic configuration when you're on production.
Yes.
I can push out my code, and then I can push out my configuration separately. I'm in a separate pipeline, more or less. And then I can make the changes separately and change the behavior of the code by updating a small configuration change.
It's kind of the same way that we have separated application deployments from your configuration deployments of the servers, or even if you look at it on a lower level, if you look at like deploying infrastructure and deploying configuration on top of that infrastructure, right? So we separated those two things because if a change in a security group is implemented, it doesn't mean that you have to deploy your infrastructure or trigger the infrastructure deployment again. So the same can apply for applications. When you have this big old binary that does a thing, you do not bake configuration items inside of that binary. You do not compile in those configuration items. Some people do, right?
We used to. Yeah.
Exactly.
Some people do it per environment. I've seen places where you've got the production build, the dev build, and the staging build, and heaven forbid you mix those up because things will go bad.
Yeah.
So I'll admit something. I do that on a day-to-day basis. But listen to me, hear me out. It's not what you think. So I'm a fan of Linux window managers, right? So these desktop, they're not even desktop anymore. It's basically window managers. A typical bare bones way to run Windows, Linux. One of the most popular window managers out there is called DWM. DWM comes from the suckless world of things. They have a bunch of software like their terminal emulators, like their browsers, but whatnot. And their mantra is like everything is compiled. If you want to make a change to your application, change the source C code. So every time I want to make a change to my terminal editor, like if I want to change a color, if I want to change the font, I need to recompile it. So that's not the way you do it. That's not something you should be doing in production. Definitely. Right.
Well, you could always do a for loop and just compile multiple binaries and then see which one you feel like on the day. Exactly. You can flip those things out. But in all seriousness, like in a production environment, if you have an application, you usually do not compile in configuration parameters. And those configuration parameters can be anything, right? They can be, I don't know, the number of outputs this is outputting, I don't know, a language you're using for all that here, right? So some of those things should not be compiled into the application, but we use something called configuration files, right? It's a text file sitting somewhere where your server can reach it, and it's just a really neat way to change those things on the fly. I mean, one example that a lot of people would hopefully have run into is the log level in terms of the detail they want from, let's say, debug versus just all versus whatever. And you want to be able to toggle that because you can imagine there's something wrong in production. You want to go dig into, hey, what's going on? And you want to increase the log verbosity. But now you're not going to have to do a redeploy to do that, wait X number of minutes. You just want to be able to switch it on, get that log, switch it off again, and then go and investigate again.
Correct. And here's a question to the audience. How do you do application configuration? Like in your production application, your development applications, how do you manage those configuration items such as log level outputs, such as, I don't know, language selections or specific output configurations? How do you do that? So please let us know in the chat. We would also like to hear those things, right? Yeah, so we have Dan MBA saying here, compile multiple binaries, use app configuration to point to current selection. Yeah, you can. Steli UK mentions this, custom CMDB or configuration management database application.
Ooh.
I remember CMDBs back in the day. I remember that we used CMDBs for like all configuration management, so including operating system configuration management. So that's a really good way to do it. Yeah. So Satya says Chef. Yeah. Satya. Yeah. Go ahead.
You can do Chef for application config because Chef obviously has the ability to manage files and also the content inside files. So in theory, nothing stops you from doing that. The challenge, having done this at one point, was that because the Chef client runs every whatever interval you set, let's say 30 minutes, you don't have fine-grained control of when that is going out. So let's say you're trying to coordinate or whatever, it's like manually SSH onto the box again, and that kind of defies the whole point of having the system in place. And yes, I know you can use knife to do remote access, but that's preferably not.
That's something that always troubled me with Chef. Like, it's a pull method, right? I cannot push a change to the servers unless you do like knife SSH and something like that. But it's various ways of doing it. So I think this is very cool, and application configuration management is great, right? We mentioned some of those things, but Steve, what other things when it comes to configuration management exist out there? Why people use configuration management? What kind of configuration settings for applications did you see?
Yeah, so in talking to some of our customers, we hear about, you already covered some of them, a lot of database configuration. That's pretty common. People might want to swap database or put credentials or those kind of things. We also hear about feature flags. That is a word that's probably overused because there's, I told you I'm passionate about configuration. You can kind of subdivide feature flags into maybe 4-ish categories. I can talk about those, but releasing new code, tweaking things. You can put throttling in. It could be a feature flag, but throttling limits is another thing we see quite a bit.
Yeah.
So that if things are running hot, you can dial up or dial down some of these operational levers. Those are common, and we also see allow listing as a feature flag or block listing.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of, the idea of I want a certain set of users to access something, or I want to block a certain set of users from accessing something. That could be like a private API. It could be a new feature. And that's a really handy thing. Again, to your example, you don't want to have to recompile code if you want to add in a new user, a new beta tester. So those are pretty common use cases.
Yeah. But we have a lot of great examples here, right? So we have, a couple of people mentioning that we have Steli saying CMDB, Satya mentioning Chef. We have Phil Zeitz. Hey, Phil, hello, welcome back. Saying parameter store, M17 key, secret manager, and also TypeScript T-time mentioned environment variables, right? So there's multiple different ways you can manage configuration, right? And I've been using environment variables a lot. Like, that's a very simple way to do it.
Absolutely.
The problem with me with environment variables is like, I need to have them somewhere defined, right? I need to have an overview of my configuration, and it's usually environment variables are usually just scattered all over the place, right? So centralized way of doing it is a bit more better, but I think we'll get into that in a moment. I was actually reading up on a couple of things regarding application configuration management, and one of the things that we've never talked about before, but I think it's a very valid thing to bring up is silent launches. So
dark launches.
Dark launches, yeah. So like when you're deploying an application, right? So let's say you're working on a big change to your application, right? And you want to implement new feature X. One of the ways you can do it is you can write your code in and just push it and commit it and just go to production and just cross your fingers. It works. Excellent, right? Or you can do something called a dark launch. And a dark launch is just you deploy your code in production. It's all in production, but it's not accessible yet. Imagine if there was a way that you can flip a flag, right, or a toggle that will enable that feature to your audience, right, to the end users, right. So that's a really great way for use of application configuration management is that you deploy this new code, you deploy all these new features, but you do not enable them. And the way you enable those new features is with feature flags, right? And feature flags can be implemented in application configuration management. So that is a really neat way of doing it. And I read that Facebook, back in the day, Corpus, do you remember when Facebook introduced Messenger?
Yep.
Yeah, so it was like a big thing, right? You can send messages on Facebook, which it was very not really good. All
We're
of a sudden,
giving away our age.
we're giving away our age, yeah. Back in 2008, and then Facebook, I think 2009, 2010, they introduced the Messenger. The thing is, they actually deployed Messenger into production, but didn't enable it for all. And what happens is they slowly change the configuration so they will enable those things, right? So I think it's just wonderful. I think that feature is wonderful. And if you look into the good book, right, the good old DevOps handbook, one of the reasons you would use feature toggles, you can have rollback safety, right? You deploy a new piece of code, it doesn't work, flip the switch, toggle it off. Gracefully degrade performance. I think that's one of the features I love the most, is that
Yeah.
if a specific part of your application just doesn't work anymore or just broken, it's you don't want that to kind of completely ruin your entire application. So that means that you will be able to kind of just disable that feature for everybody, and they can still continue working on. And also like creating a proper service-oriented architecture, right? So that's one of the ways of doing it. So I'm a fan of these things, and Cobus actually just pasted in the book, the good book.
Yes.
If you have not read this book, it's a bit dry, at least initially, but it contains so much good information. It's old; it's 2016, I think.
But Darko, that's good. You want a
Yeah.
book to be dry because you don't want to repeat yourself.
Fair point. Yeah.
Sorry, Steve, we didn't warn you. I'm terrible with dad jokes.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay, so cool. We have Holger here mentioning that he wrote an open source tool for GitOps for secrets management. Excellent, right? So if you're using parameter store, or in this case secrets manager, to do a versioning of those secrets, there's more open source tooling in here, right? So yeah.
And that's a very nice segue into the next section we want to talk about is versioning configs. Because I think most people probably just apply hey, there's a config file somewhere or something, update the value, click a button, push a commit, something, and there you go, that version goes out. And there is the latest version. It's the same as using Docker latest tags, the one version to rule them all. And there are some issues with that.
Yeah, it's problematic, right? And this takes me back to a time where young, naive Darko would use environment variables, and there was this big connection string in an environment variable, and I got a new connection string, and I deleted the old one, pasted in the new one, and the old one was lost forever. And rolling back was a thing you needed to do. So, versioning application configuration items is very powerful, right? Safely roll back. Doing things like that is very cool. Yeah.
I mean, we kind of think of configuration like we think of code. It would be foolish to not version your code.
Absolutely.
I think it's a little foolish to not version your configuration. Not all customers do it. I think eventually, as they sort of mature, they start to see the need for that. I guess it's like a lot in software. Once something goes wrong once, you say, we got to change things. And then they decide I should probably look at versioning this thing.
Exactly. We talk about GitOps, like this is part of the GitOps series, whatnot. We unofficially called it, but one of the primary reasons behind GitOps is that you need to version control things. Version control is the ultimate source of truth. Whatever you're doing inside of your environment, this ultimate source of truth is in your Git repository or whatever version code repository you're using, right? So that is the whole point. But I want to talk about the reason we have Steve here, who is from the app config team. We definitely want to talk about app config. One of the problems I've encountered with even when versioning application configuration items is deployment sometimes can be tricky, right? Mm-hmm. How do you make that change, right? What do you do? Do you just go ahead and change a file in S3 and just hope all of the things pick it up? What do you do when you roll back, right? How do you roll back? Do you do it manually, right? And I've seen people use parameter store. I've seen people use secrets manager, right? All of those things kind of require you to do some sort of a immediate replacement of that. Mm-hmm. And app config is, well, you know what, Steve, what is app config? Yeah, you're from the app config. Yeah, you're from the app config team. Why should I say that?
Yeah, no. And we do get the question sometimes. That's what's the difference between app config and parameter store or secrets manager? Why don't I just put my config in a database or S3?
Yeah.
And you hit the nail on the head that app config is a lot about deploying the configuration.
Yeah.
So we do have some solutions for storing as well. And in fact, we support parameter store as storage. We support S3 as storage. We have our own built-in storage, but a lot of it is around the deployment. And so app config helps you to essentially, when you make a change, you can validate the config. Sorry, you can validate the config before it's deployed.
Yes.
And we can talk about that if you want. There's a couple cool ways to do that. And then the deployment, you can deploy it immediately, which we generally don't recommend unless it's kind of a break glass emergency scenario. Right. Or you can deploy it gradually. And the gradually can be 10 minutes, it can be 10 days. So I'll say app config is used quite extensively inside of AWS by internal teams, inside of Amazon really. And the best practices inside of Amazon are really about slower deployments because let's get it to 1% of our users, then let's measure how do things look. What does CloudTrail look like? What does CloudWatch look like? And then, okay, we can ramp it up to 2% and then 3% and then 20 and, on and on. So there's a concept inside of app config that's called deployment strategies that allow you to either quickly or gradually, and then even gradually you can do that linearly, like a linear growth over time, or you can do it exponentially, kind of depending on what your DevOps needs are.
Yeah.
And like I said, it depends. We have customers that use all types of deployment strategies. There might be something like a big marketing event. Let's say you're doing a big marketing event in Berlin and you want it at 8 p.m. Berlin time to turn on that feature for Berlin users. And so you can sort of deploy that. You can set that up and time it so that the Berlin users get it right at 8 p.m. Yes. And again, just changing configuration instead of doing a full deployment of code. A lot less risky just to tweak that configuration and you turn on. And so that's kind of like, I want to time it. I want everybody in Berlin to have it all at once. Yeah. But then you can slowly roll it out across the world. And again, up to you how you want to release that.
Yeah.
Deployment strategy.
And go ahead, Kobus. Yeah.
Oh, no, I was going to say, so I've had the discussion around the why don't I want to just roll it out everywhere, other than just things might be breaking directly just because you've got a badly configured value. Other things that come into play here are things like, for example, the loader in your database. Because let's say you've now created a new feature that suddenly references multiple different tables. There's a left outer join.
Yes.
For 2% of the user base, you won't notice anything. But as soon as you pass the certain threshold, all of a sudden the DB starts locking up, and then everybody's having a bad time. So that's why this ramping up is important, because what will happen there is you keep an eye on the error rates. All of a sudden you see database latencies going up, error rates going up, and then you're like, okay, something's definitely not right here. When it crosses the threshold, roll back to the previous version, and then go figure out what was wrong, instead of everybody being down.
Yeah, exactly. And Chath, tell us, are you using app config? Have you ever checked it out? Right, we want to know that if you have actually experimented with AWS app config, is you have the person to bother now if it doesn't work. we have somebody to yell at here. So yeah, do let us know about that. And even for the people here using like parameter store and secrets manager, you can use that even with AWS app config, right? So app config can use, well, not secrets manager. It can use parameter. Yeah. It can use parameter store for the storage of your configuration parameters, right? And what in essence happens here with app config is app config actually helps you deploy those specific changes, right? So and actually one of the feedbacks we got last time is that you all want more code, so we've actually prepared something. So let me actually pull up something.
I brought my code.
You brought your code. Code happy, yeah.
See what that says.
Yeah, let me bring it up. So one of the things that I'm going to show you right now is that how I've integrated app config with a Lambda function, right? It's relatively simple. So first of all, let's actually go on to app config. Let me show you how app config looks like and how do you do with it? What do you do with it, right? So let's create an application. Call it stream demo. Give it a description. This is for that BRD stream. Create the application. Now within the application, we have multiple environments, right? So, and Steve, this can, I think there's a limit to amount of environments that you can do, but what do customers usually use these environments for? Is it like production and staging?
A lot of them use it, for, an alpha, beta, gamma, prod. Okay. Some customers will say, prod North America, prod Europe. So there's a limit of 100, but that's also usable. And if you need more, we can give you more, no problem. So however you want to use it, it's essentially a namespace for you to manage your config.
Wonderful. So let's create an environment here. Let's call it prod DE. Well, because I'm in Germany, right? Production Germany. Why not? And you can do monitors. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the great features of this thing. So if I decide to deploy a change of a parameter, of a configuration item to a specific environment, I can actually add CloudWatch monitors, CloudWatch alarms here that if they're triggered, the rollback can trigger, right? That's the whole point of this. It will monitor if this change is broken potentially. Is it something that I don't want it to be, right? It can actually roll back. I have no CloudWatch alarms here, so I'm going to skip that, but I create an environment. Boom. Now, the most important part is the actual configuration profile, right? And this is where the configuration sits, right? This is your meat and potatoes, the core of the things you do, right? So create configuration profile we're going to call it, let's say logging config, right? Let's do like that. Logging configuration. And what's wonderful, you can actually have the same config profile on multiple environments, right? It's not tied to a single environment. So let's say we have our logging configuration set up here, and I can attach it to any environment I have. And here are your configuration sources. And I think this is wonderful, right? So you can define basically your text file here, right? Or your JSON or YAML, depending on which version of DevOps you bought. But you can actually pick an S3 object. You can do systems manager document, so a document in a systems manager, which is also a valid choice. Your parameter store things, and also a code pipeline. Now, I have not seen code. How does this work, Steve? I have not worked with the code pipeline as this.
There's an integration with code pipeline that actually allows you to set Bitbucket or GitHub or something as the source for your configuration. Okay. And then it puts your configuration through the code pipeline, and you can deploy it as an app config deployment. And so some of the similar things that you have, but I'd say a little bit more sophistication in terms of you can coordinate and sequence regions. You can do quite a bit with the code pipeline integration.
Right. Okay. Well, cool. But okay, then let's actually do this thing, and let's do JSON, right? So if we do something like JSON should never be written. Beard.
Copy paste.
True. Right, there you go. So that's a configuration item. So that's a toggle in my application, right? If I go here, I can do some description. Yeah, this is enable beard. Next. Here are some validators. Now, this is also a powerful part of app config, right? So it actually is able to validate your configuration items, right? And is this specifically for hosted configuration items, or is it
validate? You can validate all types.
All types.
Yeah.
So you can say just maybe your JSON schema validation, or if you want to do some. Go ahead.
So I was going to say, just quickly for the audience, just quick show of hands, who's actually broken, like production or any other environment, just because you made a typo? Like literally, when you entered, there was a backslash on the keyboard. Yeah, it's like,
yeah, and this is
you know.
Yeah, and when things are a little tense, you were talking about the logging verbosity. Well, that's the example here. When things are a little tense, it's easy to have that typo, and so you want to have a couple of those sort of safety guards in place to protect you. And yeah, can I talk about these two things? So JSON schema, I think people understand it validates the values inside of JSON.
Yeah.
Kind of a simple validation. The Lambda validation is more complex. It allows you to basically use a Lambda function to validate whatever you want. So a use case there is, again, if you have database configuration strings and you want to push out a new database, you can, before that change is made, you can actually go and with the Lambda function, you can load the database, you can look at a table, you can manipulate some data, you can make sure that the database is actually available before you update that configuration. So, again, it's a very powerful, you write the Lambda function yourself.
Exactly.
It's a very powerful tool for making sure that you don't accidentally push out some config that's going to break stuff.
I think it's a wonderful sanity check for configuration items, right? Just make sure that they actually work, that they're valid, and you can do it's code, right? You can do anything you want in this case with your configuration items. Right. Validate them in any way you want. So in this case, I'm going to remove my validators completely because I trust a single parameter. Never trust yourself. Never trust yourself. That is very important. And create configuration profile. And that's it. Right? So go ahead.
Before we do it, just a quick question over here from TypeScript Tea Time, which is validation runtime is nice, but it means the app's already broken. And this is exactly what this addresses.
Yes.
It's that let's catch that bug before, because I know, Darko, you often talk about the time between making a change or creating or committing code to getting that feedback in.
Yes.
And the shorter, the better.
Exactly. It's that moment when you hit your key to submit a change to production, and you realize as your finger is pressing the key that this will break stuff. And this will actually prevent some of those things because it validates the configuration validity before it even reaches anything, right? So it's a really nice test for your configuration item, which is also important. In GitOps, we say that when you make a change, it needs to be validated, it needs to be tested against before it reaches anything. So this is a really neat way to do that.
Yep.
So I have this thing here. It's a simple configuration item, and if I go to my stream demo here, stream demo, and I can go to my environment and I can go start a deployment. What this will do is I can say deploy this specific version of configuration. So your logging config. This is the version I want of this configuration to deploy, and these are the deployment strategies. Now there's a bunch of deployment strategies built in, but you can create them yourself as well, right? So this is a great way because you can do like canary deployments, right? You can have 10% of your users getting this new thing, and don't think there's a really a way to control who gets it, but it's a random 10% of requests get this configuration item. So basically 10% of your Lambda functions of your application requests will get this specific new version of the configuration item for the next 20 minutes. And you can include all of your monitoring in this case just to make sure that it's all working. And if it goes bad, you can actually roll back immediately the configuration item to something else, right?
Darko, if I can interrupt too. Yeah, you're right. That this does a deployment across your whole fleet.
Yeah.
If you do want to target it, generally what our customers will do is they'll create an allow list as configuration as well, so that they can target to specific users.
Okay. Yeah.
That's important. So there's a way to do that. Just this is a little bit different.
Right. Before we continue, I see a lot of new folks joining. Hello and welcome to DevBeardOps. This is a weekly show we do. This gentleman here and myself and a few other people as well do every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central European Time. It's a show about the cloud, automation, DevOps, and everything in between. Today we're talking about AWS. Well, we're actually talking about the application configuration management, and coincidentally, one of the services at AWS we use is AWS App Config. So right now, what we're doing is actually showing a demo how you can actually build App Config and how can you use it. So, welcome, and feel free to let us know if you're using some sort of application configuration management as well. Go ahead.
I think I just want to throw in here because I don't think we've ever done this. Just for those who are curious, this is a live stream. We answer questions. This is not pre-recorded.
Yeah.
Hi.
It's not pre-recorded? We're not recording? Yes. So Kobus, make a cut here, please, so we can...
Okay.
Yeah, we love to do things live. So it's all about, live streams are not about us talking about things. It's also us about talking with you. So we like to get your interaction here as well. So I'm going to choose this quick option, which is not recommended in production, but I am, it's a live stream, so we need to be quick. And I can also give it like, hey, trying things out.
Just quickly before we go on, just bring that drop down
Clicked
again.
it.
So we can...
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I had to pull away my mouse.
Hit the drop down again just quickly, because there were a couple of terms in there like bake time and those kind of things. So I think we just need to quickly cover what those are, what do they mean, etc. Because there's deployment time, bake time, and percentage. Go.
Okay. Steve, go.
Yeah. So yeah, there's two different concepts there: deployment time and bake time. Deployment time is the rolling out, across the fleet, as I said. So it's 10%, 10%, 10%, whatever you configure. And then bake time is after everything's rolled out, how long do you want to continue monitoring the application for its health through the CloudWatch alarms. And so that the bake time is important for rollback. So generally, I'd say, again, depending on the complexity of what you're doing, a few minutes usually know something's going wrong. 10 minutes is a good number too. But we do have customers using bake time longer than that. Again, there's some fine-grained controls there that allow you to roll out exactly how you want. I do want to point out too, these are some that come with app config. You can go ahead and make your own. You can customize and create your own custom deployment strategy.
Exactly. You can change these to be, like linear exponential. You can change the step percentage, the deployment time, and the bake time. So all of these are kind of just here so you can increase the safety of deployments. Remember, we need safe deployments, right? When you hit that enter button, you don't want to be, right? Even if you did something bad, it's potentially able to catch the problems you have. So, okay, this start deployment, boom. So now it's deploying. Because it's quick, the deployment time is 0. It's going to just deploy to all immediately. So the flip is going to be immediate. However, the baking time is 10 minutes. So that means within the next 10 minutes, it's going to keep on monitoring the alarms, which we didn't set up. But if there were some alarms, it would keep on monitoring those alarms. And if something went wrong, it would roll back immediately. So that's kind of a thing. Now,
Fun question now, because I do not know this answers, and I hope Steve you do, is like, this is our first config we deployed. What happens with rollback if it fails?
It rolls back immediately. So it'll, obviously we have it versioned, and it'll just redeploy the previous version in all targets.
Okay, but I mean, in this case, we didn't have a version at all. This is our very, very first version, so...
I think it just fails, right?
Oh yeah, it just fails. Sorry, I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah, for the first one. Yeah,
cool. Okay.
And when an app config was first released, like my question was always like, so where's this deploying to? I didn't tell it a server to deploy to. I didn't give it a Lambda function or a container to deploy to. Where does it deploy to? It deploys, to the cloud. it deploys to itself. It basically makes these options accessible, right? You are able to now to get these configuration items from app config. That's it. And actually, let me show you how that is done. I have a little application here that, let me actually trigger it. So if I do, there's a HTTP there. It's a super application that basically just spits out a little stupid quote in English and just some other additional data, right? So it's an application, nothing special, just it randomly dumps some quote unquote random quotes. If you are coming from the part of the world where I am coming from, you may recognize these quotes a bit later on. So it's nothing special. Let's say I want to introduce a feature to increase the number of quotes from 1 to 5. Right? I can actually change my Lambda function to kind of increase the number of quotes, but I can also do it with configuration management. So if you look at my Lambda function here, it's a simple Python-based Lambda function with all the data inside of it, because that's how you do Lambda functions, I guess. And what it does here, it actually gets the configuration from app config. So it uses the AWS SDK to reach out, gets the environment variables for the specific configuration, app config configuration, and then basically gets those items, right? Gets the items from app config. Then based on the app config items such as the language or the result limit, which is just a number I've set, I do something, right? So if for example, result limit is 1, it will only return 1 quote. If the language is English, it's going to return the English language quote. If I, for example, disable limit results, it's going to be set to 2, right? These are the language configuration items also. But here's the thing. There's another thing I have. Chaos. I love this. So how to simulate chaos in your application with config. You can actually enable chaos by enabling the chaos switch here by, for example, randomly, right? I think it's 20% of the time I'm gonna throw a 500 error here, right? From this application. And this is also a configuration item within app config. And to see the exact app config configuration, I have it here, configuration profile. And the thing is, this is actually sitting in Systems Manager. So it's, if I go to Systems Manager parameter store and go here and look at the Lambda config prod, this is my configuration item. Those are the things my application is getting from app config. So if I want to change this, right? If I want to change from one quote and English to, let's say, Serbian and 5 quotes, I can actually go and update this parameter store here saying result are going to be 5 and the language is going to be Serbian, and I'm going to save, but it's not deployed yet. This has not been deployed, right? It's not that raw way of deploying things. My application will still get only a single quote and a single, and it's going to be in English. If I go back to app config, click on the Lambda demo, go to the production environment, because this is using the production environment, start deployment, choose the newest version, which is now 11, use the quick way of doing it, and start the deployment. Now, my Lambda function all of a sudden has the ability to get these new values. And here's a question from M17 Kia, right? In a non-Lambda example, how would you listen for this change? There's no way to listen for it, right? You need to poll it. That's the thing, right? These things are polled. On Lambda functions, it's easy because every time a Lambda function executes, these things change. But in a server environment, you would need to poll for such a thing, right? I think there's no way to enable SNS notifications on these things, right? As of now, so there's no feature like an SNS notification that will notify everybody that the change has happened. But for example, if your application, anytime it does something, anytime a user refreshes a page or a user logs in, it will check specific configuration items in app config and pull those things in, right? So, yeah.
So, and I mean, it's also something like when this happens, it's important how to time it, because you can imagine, let's say I've got 50 containers running my web server, and now all of a sudden I push a config change, all of them grab it at the same time, restart the container. You've got this thud of everything going down and coming back up again, and that's not what you want.
Right? Yeah. Let's actually answer a couple more questions here. So from Mohammed, app config can integrate with Systems Manager. Yes, it can. Mohammed, as you've seen here, the current parameters I'm passing to my application are all sitting in SSM parameter store, and app config is just deploying them. So that is a way to do it. Question from Lucian. Hey, Lucian. Hi, welcome back. How does automatic rollback impact handle changes to the database, e.g. database table changes? So there's been a couple of questions, I think, over the last couple of episodes when we talk about deployments and impacts to the database. How do you handle databases when making changes? There's 2 ways of doing it. There's the blue-green, which is expensive, right? You have your primary database, flip it to read-only, spin up a different database, right? Have that one be the new one in the other environment, and then if something goes back, you need to flip to the old one, but you also need to copy the new additions to it. It's a mess, right? The other option, which is actually explained in the good book, is how's it called? Expand and contract. Yes, expand and contract. If you are going to write to the same database, add data to new rows, to new tables, right? Do not write and overwrite existing data. Do not mutate existing data. add new data. And if something has happened to your deployment that completely breaks and you have to roll back to the previous version, you still have the old unmutated data, and you can just kind of migrate the newly created data into new rows, new whatnot. That's the proper way of doing it. At least one of the two ways I know. Now, I'm sure there's other ways, but these are the two ways I know.
But I mean, to just quickly dig into that, to give you a practical example that most people should be able to follow. Let's say you've got a user table, and in there you've got a column for passwords, and it's plain text. Please don't do this, just as a caveat. And you've now realized this is a terrible idea. We need to go fix it.
I did that. What? You don't what?
Right. I'm not Darko, you're fired. Cheers.
my first project included passwords in plain text.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was the way you do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, then it's easy to do a password retrieval. You just send them a mail with it. Done.
Exactly.
Yeah. But basically, what happens then is, like, let's say the naive approach is, let me go change the code to now have, like, let's say some kind of hashing algorithm in it. And what I do is I change the code to be able to say, okay, cool. Now when I save a password, hash it. And when I check the password, take the input, hash it, and then do a hash compare. Then I write a database script that says, okay, cool, go and update that column. Here's the function to change text into that, flip it all. And now you do this deployment. And you're kind of sitting there hoping, like, okay, cool, the DB script runs and the code comes online, and one or two logins might fail, but it should be okay, right? Maybe, hopefully. And then something happens, the database locks up, and halfway through, half the database is now hashed, half isn't. Yes. You're screwed.
Yeah,
it's terrible. What you do is, like the process Darko described, is instead of doing that as first, send out a deploy that creates the new column, nullable, saying this is the hashed password. Then what you do is you go and update your code, saying, listen, what we're going to do now is there are two columns. Whenever there's a new password update, go and run the hashing algorithm, store the plain text, and store the hashed version.
Yes.
Deploy that, get it out, make sure it works. Then over time, what you do is you start saying, okay, cool, now start having a script that runs through the database, says, take it, hash it, store it, which means that's non-destructive. It's not the critical path of code at the moment. Until you get to the point where everything's up to date, then you change the code to say, listen, now only look at the new column, but you still don't drop the old column.
Yes,
because guess what? You can't roll back. And then only once you get to the point where you see, listen, that is now fine, remove the code that references the old column, push that out, and then finally, if you need to, drop the column.
Yeah, exactly. So like when you're Cobus talked about this a long time ago. When you're translating, when you're moving from a monolith to microservices, the strangler approach, right? This is similar to that, right? You're adding new things. You're not removing existing things, and slowly but surely, the new things will overcome the old ones. So the same goes for a database as well. So thank you for all the questions. Steve, we have Holger here mentioning that Event Bridge would be great for this, a PFR, right?
Perfect.
So yeah, it's a great feature request. I think that would be amazing if you can, if Systems Manager, if AppConfig can throw a notification into Event Bridge that this has happened, something else can pick it up, right? No need to pull things all the time.
Absolutely. Yes, PFR.
There you go. So excellent. So let's actually have a look at what this is currently in the baking phase. Baking. 4
minutes left, bake, finish.
Exactly. So the it's accessible now. Even if it isn't baking, it's now it's listening to problems. There will be no problems because there's nothing to check for problems. But the best way the best way to avoid problems is not even to look for problems, right? So So my application now has the new version. So if I would do this right now, I should get 5 quotes in Serbian this time, or Serbo-Croatian. So this is basically the change has been applied. I didn't make any changes to my application. The code is exactly the same. I have not modified anything from my application. Nothing. I've just pushed the change to AppConfig, and now when my Lambda function runs, the query, the configuration items it receives are new, and based on those things, it can actually just, get me something new here. That's it. That's wonderful, right? Again, and if this was broken, if I would do stop deployment right now, it's gonna roll back to the old version, right? So this was bad. Cobus said, like, what are you doing? No, stop. And I just click the whole roll back button, and it's basically gonna be roll back. Do this. And we're back. Boom. Simple as that, right? Builder, PFR is product feature request. So PFRs are the things you come tell us, right? Hey, Cobus and Arco, we would love to have this feature on Service X. Then we go ahead and to say, Steve, hey, Steve, hi, listen, we have people asking for this. Could you please put this on your list? So
no, we love those. Yeah, they're super important to get all that feedback, and trust me, they are the biggest priority that we have. So.
Exactly. So there you go. So now, if, for example, I have multiple environments, I could have easily told my Lambda function that, instead of listening for the production version, oops, let me go up. There you go. The environment is, instead of just using this one, use the staging environment or whatever environment, whatever my app config configuration is, and also which configuration item are we pulling in. So all of these things are weirdly enough as environment variables, but you can actually define them within the script, the Lambda function itself. So it is pretty cool. There's also this thing, the client ID. This is used for a bunch of other things because this is being passed back to app config. So when we talk about canary deployments, right, your 20%, if the same client ID keeps coming back, it will not get a different result, right? Different configuration item, right? If you have a client ID, if you have a process, if you have a state machine doing something, right, it would be super weird that 20% of your Lambda functions in that state machine would do something different, right? So if you have a client ID or you pass something through it, it can actually use that to make sure you get the proper value. So yeah.
Well, could be some fun chaos engineering.
Exactly.
You config for 20%, right?
So if I would do, let me actually try this. We have some time. So let me go back to parameter store. Let me enable chaos. So if I go here and I should also change this using through code, but I don't. I apologize. I love that we're talking about GitOps and you see me here clicking a lot. Chaos is true, right? Save. Boom, app config. Let's deploy it once more. Lambda demo, Lambda prod, start deployment, 12, boom, all at once. Start.
I should just have been renamed to YOLO.
Exactly. YOLO. Now it's deploying, and okay, it's baking. So now, if I would be running my application, in 20% of the time, I should be getting a 500 error. There you go. The monkey is in the tank. There you go. Once more, monkey's in the tank. It's 20%. There you go. It works now. It doesn't work now. That's more than 20%, but it's 20%. It's random. It's
random is hard.
Yeah, the percentage here is not being done by app config. It's actually done by my Lambda function.
That's not in your code. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. We have a couple of comments here. So from El Reciferado de la Grieta. There you go. I kind of want to integrate this with my configuration library to allow data binding and hot reloading. Would it also be cool to use it at work, to be honest, and give it a try? Check it out, right? So is there a universal acronym for this? RFE. Did we use RFEs? No, PFRs, product feature request. That's the one we use. Yeah. So so if you have some Mr. or Mrs. El Resfriado de la Grieta, let us know if you have a feature request for this. We would always like to pass it on to folks such as Steve here to kind of make the services better. Okay.
Yeah, kind of an important thing. You talk about hot reloading, and it's I think the sweet spot for app config are these dynamic configurations.
Yes.
Not necessarily things that are loaded at init, but things that, or when the container's spun up. You can do that, but it's the runtime stuff that is really handy for.
Exactly. I just want to put something in the chat. So here's the link to Werner's blog. Werner Vogels, our CTO, wrote a blog post about continuous configuration, and there's a lot of examples regarding using app config. I would definitely advise you to check it out. It's a wonderful read. So it's technical. It's all those things. So if you're interested in a bit more on this, check that blog post out. So I think it's a really good wrap up point for this entire episode or this entire discussion, right? So okay. So what did we do today? What did we talk about today? We talked about application configuration code. Yeah, of course. We talked about application configuration management, about how you actually manage your application configuration. Do you compile it in? Do you use a text file on the file system where your application is running? Do you request it from parameter store or from an S3 bucket? How do you deploy it? So we've actually seen we've seen the way to deploy this code using AWS App Config, which is just a wonderful service to help you manage your application configuration and deployments. And those configuration items can be anywhere. It can be in S3, it can be in
Store, document store,
parameter store, documents, and all of the different kind of places. It can also be hosted. Oh, did the stream stop? Is it back? Oh,
I'm looking at it.
yeah. We should be good.
Wrong, but continue. I'll look into it.
Yeah. Okay, good. So you didn't miss much. We're actually just wrapping up what we're doing. So, but yeah. So check out App Config, right? Check out App Config if you are interested in doing proper application configuration management. Again, there's a lot of other tools out there, but App Config is very much integrated within AWS and how it works with AWS services. So if you're a Lambda user, there's even a Lambda extension for App Config, so you don't even need to do the fancy SDK stuff I've done here. I've just showed you the SDK stuff because that's how you'd approach it from any application anywhere, right? Even if it was running on your workstation, it's an API endpoint somewhere out there where you reach to. Steve, any closing thoughts?
I am just, as I said, I'm really passionate about configuration. I love hearing how people use it. So thank you for doing this. This has opened up some thinking on for the team, and this is awesome.
Good, yeah. And for if you have regarding App Config or any other service at AWS, you have a feature request. If you have something that you would love to be implemented, and you can tell us why, because usually some people are like, oh, I would like to have this. Why? I think it's cool. So let us know. We're also always happy to share the information with folks such as Steve and other people from other service teams as well. And and with that, I think we can bring this to the end.
Yes, we've got 60 seconds left.
We have 60 seconds left.
Time for a quick horror story. I worked at a place where we would take the bytecode from Java, seeing as there's a Java comment, compile it, take the byte stream, put that in the database, and that is how you hot-loaded plugins. You would literally deserialize and send it directly to the JVM and then version it and change things out like that. Yeah. Don't do that.
Our good buddy Richard Boyd. So if you know, Richard Boyd is a developer advocate at AWS. He did a demo with App Config, I think a couple of months back, where he loaded application code into App Config and he would just read it in a Lambda function. You can do that. You can load your entire Lambda function from App Config.
Yeah.
Should you do that? That's a different question. Cool. Thank you all for joining us. Next week at the same time, same place, we'll see you all there. Steve, thank you very much for joining. It's been a pleasure. With that, bye-bye.
Adios.